Hello.
Our story begins after a contested battle during the second year of the Clone War. Ahsoka and Anakin were once again victors, but were they really? As Jedi, was there any perceivable way to justify a victory? Ahsoka felt a great deal of shame. While her teacher was good to her, the idea of fighting in the war was constant as a point of contention between the two of them. It didn't happen often, but when it did, their argument could become very testy. Ahsoka hated losing troopers in battle, and after this particular engagement, the casualty numbers were high. It wasn't any life to live, and as a 16-year-old, she felt so much disdain for the life she was living. It was causing her constant heartache. Being in a legion she was in, she saw the worst of the war, and it took a toll on her. While she wasn't present for Umbara, she just remembered uniting with her men and seeing so many faces missing. The worst part of every battle was, regardless of them being victory or loss, which there were a few losses, were the reinforcements. The 501st didn't go to Kamino to pick up troops, they were always coming to them, so Ahsoka would always have to stand with her master in the cargo bay when they welcomed in the new troops. They were permitted to enter without their helmets on, but most of them wore them. That didn't matter though. Ahsoka could feel it through the Force. Maybe each Jango Fett clone had his face, but his name, his mindset, his personality were all vastly different. Each clone had a unique presence in the Force, and Ahsoka dreaded the idea of these men coming off of Kamino going straight to their deaths. The troopers sent to the 501st weren't just regular shinies. These were the most elite troopers and squads on Kamino. Others would go to the Galactic Marines or the 212th, but the main legion to go to was the 501st. Ahsoka had many sleepless nights over this. While Jedi weren't permitted to have attachments, it naturally happened. Anakin spoke of these attachments, and even Obi-Wan did. It was inevitable. They were fighting shoulder to shoulder on the battlefront. Ahsoka was the clone's little sister, and same as she was with Skywalker. However, nothing could ever prepare you for letting go of those attachments in the way she'd become accustomed to. Her brothers would go out into the battlefield, and all their jokes would disappear, all their personalities would stiffen, the screaming and the pain echoed throughout each and every battle, and it felt like it never ended. It was the most horrific experience in the galaxy. What hurt more than any of that was what Ahsoka was for the clones. She was almost like an angel of death for them. She'd always be with the troopers in the medical field when the battle was over. She was the last sight for many of them, the last comfort they ever received before they became one with the Force, and that burden to put onto a 16-year-old was detrimental to her own health. The few times Ahsoka could actually sleep, her dreams were filled with nightmares. She would oftentimes call her friend Barriss and talk about them. The two of them were becoming increasingly tired of the war and fighting in it. How were they supposed to do that? While Barriss was closer to Anakin's age, she was still a Padawan, and her instructor made every ounce of the war all the more difficult for her. So, in their adolescent foolishness, they figured they would show the Jedi what this war really did to them. A plan started to form, and Barriss used a couple of her contacts on Coruscant to get nanotechnology. Ahsoka didn't believe bombing the hangar bay was the best idea. She wanted to make a point to the Jedi Order, and perhaps the Council. Barriss suggested they bomb the High Council chambers instead, and Ahsoka would have been on board, but Plo and Obi-Wan were on that council. There was no reason to kill them or endanger their lives. The purpose of this was to send a message, and Ahsoka didn't want innocents to be killed in the process. But not for nothing, she was her master's student, and being like Anakin herself, it was within her to try and kill people. Maybe she didn't know that yet, maybe she didn't see it, but it was within her. Put there since the Battle of Chrysophsis, and only amplified since. The idea the two of them got was to bomb the Master's hallway inside the temple. Doing so in the middle of the day would reduce the potential casualties. It was a perfect message to the Order, that their failure had ruined an entire generation of Jedi. Of course, they were not to be caught, they were just trying to send a message, so once Ahsoka arrived at Kid Nemodia with her master, she was prepared for everything to go right. It didn't. The bomb was placed to perfection, and Barriss was able to use a mind control ability on the Force to get one of the citizens to sneak into the area and lay the bomb. However, the nanotechnology was highly reactive, and because the trap wasn't set right, it exploded in the dead of the night, killing around 40 Jedi Masters. There were a couple of Republic citizens who were cleaning the halls of the temple when the bomb went off. The Jedi had amnesty programs to help reform in the Republic, so good prisoners were able to work inside the temple. Though with their deaths on the hands of the Jedi, it went from a Jedi case to a Republic one. Ahsoka and Anakin were brought back to the temple, and when Ahsoka realized what her actions had done, she was horrified. She couldn't believe it. She and Barriss were both distraught. The action had the inverse effect of what they wanted, and now several lives were dead because of them. The two of them had time to talk with each other and spend time around the other, so they were able to try and concoct a way to stay out of this. But there was no way out of it. Guilt was written on their faces, and they weren't able to play it off. Obviously, a guilty face didn't make a guilty culprit, so they weren't discovered until about a week into the investigation. Ahsoka and Barriss didn't reveal who their contacts were, but there was a found hollow recording inside the database of the cybersecurity of the temple. What was unknown to Barriss and Ahsoka was that every single transmission that left the temple could be recorded. This wasn't done until after Sifo-Dyas died and Dooku left the Order. The Council heightened their response shortly after the Battle of Geonosis, when they learned that Sifo-Dyas was behind the creation of the clone army. Even though every call was recorded, they typically weren't watched over. It was for security purposes, but it also helped with calling up old strategies that failed and calls during the early war if needed. With 10,000 Jedi, it was just too hard to maintain every day. But the server was scanned through by Republic droids and Jedi droids. While most Republic citizens weren't that upset about the death of the prisoners, the entire debacle made the Jedi look worse, which for Palpatine was perfect. He had no plans in this, and he had no intention of caring about what the Jedi did in response. It was a very simple trial. Padme represented the two Jedi, and Tarkin was the prosecutor. With no one standing beside them, aside from the High Council and Anakin in attendance, there was no lighter sentence for them. Both Ahsoka Tano and Barriss Offee would die in the death sentence. It all happened so fast. Anakin couldn't believe what had happened, or how it happened. He just wished it never did. His student, his little sister, his best friend, was going to die, and he felt at fault for it. But he couldn't even focus on his own emotions at the moment. He would have one last visit with Ahsoka before she would be put to death. The conversation was filled with tears, confusion, sadness, anger, and so forth. Anakin didn't even think to ask Ahsoka why she did it. He just didn't want her to be afraid in her last moments of life. When he entered the room, he just spoke to her, trying to raise her spirits. There was none of that though. She made her error, she committed her crime. Barriss wasn't even visited by her own master, so she was just happy for the company. Luminara completely disregarded her failure. She couldn't believe what Barriss had done, and she wanted nothing to do with the atrocity she committed. Ahsoka and Anakin had around 20 minutes with each other. They would share memories with each other and even share potential aspirations, ones that would never come true for Ahsoka. Being so young, Ahsoka never thought to say the words to Anakin when it came to telling him that it wasn't his fault. It just never crossed her mind. She never blamed him, but potentially it was because part of her failure was his failure as a teacher. They would end their conversation with a hug as shock troopers entered the cell and pulled Anakin away. There'd be no viewing party. Ahsoka and Barriss were set to die alone, in front of no one other than the executioner and each other. The room was set up as airy and deathly as possible. 2 chairs facing each other. Attached to each chair was a stent that would be plugged into their arms, and it would transfer the lethal dosage. Ahsoka was brought in first, her legs weak under the weight in her heart. She was essentially carried into the room. As the clone strapped her to the chair, her skin trembled and her body shivered as she heard noises from outside the door behind her. She could look around, but the room was empty. There was nothing in sight, and she could only hear herself breathe. The door behind her opened as the same 2 clones walked Barriss over to her chair, sat her down, and strapped her in. The seats weren't very comfortable, as one of the troopers informed them that the executioner would be in the room eventually. If they tried to leave, the entire room would be gassed and they would die. This was the least painful option. They looked to each other in terror as the clones walked out of the room. When the door slammed shut, a tear slid down Ahsoka's eye. They didn't blame the other. It was a mutual decision, and this was their consequence. They could hear more shuffling outside the door, and their attention was brought back to each other, wishing that perhaps in another life, they wouldn't have to die this way. It was wishful thinking, but it was better than thinking about the end of their life just moments away. The door opened and both of them froze up as Commander Fox walked into the room. He didn't say a word. He walked up to Ahsoka and gently twisted her arm, plugging the stent in. He then walked over to Barriss and did the exact same thing. He didn't say a word. He didn't even look them in the eyes. He was the executioner. He was the only one to do it. He stepped behind them to the middle of the room, between the 2 chairs as he grabbed a small device that would release the lethal liquid at the same time. Both their eyes watered. Nervous habits presented themselves. For Ahsoka, her fingers dug at the chair. For Barriss, her heel tapped the ground repetitively. Ahsoka squeezed out a couple final words. She wished that the Force would be with Barriss. A small smile grew on Barriss's face as she went to repeat the same words, and then everything went dark. Inside the industrial sector, the darkness would become light. Barriss and Ahsoka had restraints on their wrists, and their vision was blurry. Standing before them was a man with dark robes, and they looked up. He said only 3 words: join or die. Both former Jedi looked to each other, not understanding what had just happened. Sidious knew that. He wanted to put the thought of death into their fragile minds to begin with. Commander Fox gave them a drug to knock them out. It was so vile that it actually felt like death. It just didn't result in it. Sidious planned for this. He waited for them to gather their composure. When they did, he removed the restraints and requested they fall along with him. Their minds were foggy, so every word he said felt like they echoed, as if it were Mother Talzin talking to them. It all felt so surreal, but that didn't matter. They stumbled behind Sidious until they walked into a room. In the room were their lightsabers. Well, not their lightsabers, but they were replicas. Inside were crystals already bled and ready to be used. As they both realized what was happening and who this was, they became even more entranced. Sidious spoke in his delicate yet hypnotic voice, drawing them closer without them even realizing how much an effect it had on them. Sidious drew them in closer, telling them that this was the only choice to make: become his students, learn to use the dark side of the Force. The Jedi had betrayed them, they encouraged war, and they lied. True reform came in the form of the Sith, and if they joined, they would have their praises sung in the era of the new Empire. Both the former Jedi were so confused, so afraid, and so far from the path they believed they would stick to. Everything had gone so wrong in the last week, and only now did they realize in their adolescent failure what they had done to themselves. If they really wanted to live, then they would have to serve the Dark Lord of the Sith. He brought them before their replicas of their blades and told them, once more, join or die. He stepped back, holding his lightsaber visibly in his dominant hand. Ahsoka looked over at Sidious and then her Jedi weapon. He grinned. Barriss told Ahsoka that this wasn't right, and part of her agreed. She reached forward, grabbing the dark blade, and she felt a surge rise through her body. The darkness was so powerful. She turned back to Sidious and ignited the weapon. Her initial plan was to kill Sidious, but when she felt the crimson lightsaber ignite, and when she saw the blade in her hand, she felt chosen. Ahsoka looked at Sidious and then to Barriss. Her mind changed. In a short moment, she saw the potential of the Sith. She was taught to resist the darkness her entire life, but maybe that wasn't the path forward. Maybe that wasn't what was best for the galaxy. Sidious said her name, calling her Ahsoka Tano, and she turned her head. He told her that the Force was strong with her. He stepped forward, not afraid to confront the lightsaber of a former Jedi. He walked up to her until her blade visibly lit the bottom of his jaw. She could see the sinister smile, and he told her that the darkness would aid her. She could be so much more, and she could finally help the galaxy move into a new direction, one without the Jedi. Part of her didn't want to. The reason she didn't bond the Council was because of Plo and Obi-Wan, but they kicked her from the Order without a second thought. Anakin was the only good one, but he could see the path, right? He would be able to see that the Jedi were bad, because if the Sith could reinstate the galaxy and end the war, end death and destruction, then could they really be so bad? Barriss could see the change in her friend as she rose to her feet. Sidious tilted his head towards her and told her that all she had to do was join. They would be safe, and he would teach them the true meaning of the dark side. Ahsoka extinguished the crimson blade, and she looked at Sidious, expressing that she would be willing to learn. This wasn't her committing to the dark side fully. She was willing to see where this went. If it took her places she was willing to go, then it would be worth it. Because Ahsoka joined, Barriss was willing to do so as well. Sidious told them both that they would have no contact with the Jedi, their friends, or those they were once close with. This would be the restart for their lives. If they listened, they would find their power and grow in the new galaxy. This was the most frightening piece of information. They'd have to kill off their former selves to become students of Darth Sidious. When they showed little to no hesitation in response of what he said, he requested that they kneel before him, and they did. On the other side of the planet, Anakin was inside of his room, an orange haze illuminating the darkness left behind. There are many directions Skywalker could take his thoughts, but not an ounce of blame could be thrown at the Jedi Council. They removed Ahsoka from the Order because she was responsible for bombing the temple. It would have been different had she not been involved, but she was one of the two responsible for the horrendous act, which meant that the shame and the blame fell back onto him. As a Jedi, he had grown up into understanding that if a student fails, it's the Master's fault. The burden could be most easily seen on Yoda's face, considering Dooku was his greatest failure as a student. Anakin now understood that pain, and because of how connected he was to his attachments, it hurt him with so much more force. He just lay on his bed, running through every memory, seeing the Jedi training he received as a precipice for his thoughts. He didn't blame the Jedi or the war. Rather, he went through every single moment he and Ahsoka had during the war. Was he too serious or unserious at Ryloth? Did he make her feel as if her voice wasn't heard? Did he demean her too much on Felucia? Did he not trust her enough before they went to the Citadel? Did he trust her too much before Kid and Nemodia? It couldn't be Kid and Nemodia. Their plans had been in the works for months. Did he make her feel as if she didn't have value? He wasn't sure, but the thoughts just ran around in circles inside of his head. He took 100% of the responsibility for it, because as a Jedi, it was his duty and his responsibility to take the blame for the failure of his Padawan. It's how the system worked. If he trained the student to knighthood, then he would be rewarded. However, with a circumstance like this, Anakin began to question everything he ever did. This was so uncharacteristic of Ahsoka. What had gone so wrong, and how long did she hide it? The one memory Anakin kept coming back to was Ryloth. In space, she held her first command and she lost her troops. On the ground, she and him got into a small debacle about the whole battle and the whole war. Could it really have started there? It was probable. Anakin legitimately couldn't live with this. The guilt, the anger, the sadness for sending his student to her death at such a young age burdened him. It was unfair. He thought of leaving the Order, but to each and every single thought he walked himself back, because if he continued down this path, he would only continue to be a failure of a Jedi. If he turned further into darkness, he would reject what he had done wrong, what he had failed Ahsoka in, therefore elongating the cycle of pain for others. If he left the Jedi Order, he couldn't help but bring balance to the Force or end the war. He wouldn't be a part of that. So, he decided that he would make a move. He wanted to apologize to the High Council. It didn't really make sense. Truthfully, it made none, but in the moment it felt like the most appropriate thing for him to do. So he went to the council to provide a formal apology. He entered relatively unannounced, but the council was willing to hear him considering what had just happened. He stepped forward and spoke.
I'd like to formally apologize for failing to train my student to knighthood. I'm sorry for her actions, and I'd like to take responsibility for what happened.
The council chambers were eerily silent. No one said a word. Everyone just looked at him, like he had lost his mind. They never blamed Anakin. He may have been unorthodox, but nothing he did could have incited such behavior from Ahsoka. Obviously, Anakin wasn't going to just outright say he force-choked someone in front of her, or he uses anger to fuel him, but they all looked around and then the Grand Master spoke out.
Blame you. We do not.
While traditionally the failure of a student falls onto their teacher, this was more than a failure.
Master Plo is correct. The Council doesn't blame you for the actions of Ahsoka Tano.
Clear it was, by the bond you shared. The problem, you were not.
Tragically, the tale of little Soka is one of self-failure. Her choices were one of her own making. And that is not a responsibility you must bear.
Anakin, you must not hurt yourself over this. Do you believe that you will be all right before returning to active combat?
I believe so. I'm sorry for interrupting your session.
Council, I would like to suggest that we pair young Skywalker with Master Kenobi for the rest of the war.
Agree, I do. Skywalker, done nothing wrong, have you? Wish for your happiness, the Council does. Pair you with Kenobi, we will.
Remember, Anakin, the Force works in mysterious ways. We might not have the answers before us now, but trust the current path and they will be revealed.
We appreciate your kind-heartedness, but we never blamed you for Ahsoka's actions. As you move forward with Master Kenobi, trust in the Force, it will always guide you.
Young Skywalker, may the Force be with you.
Thank you, Masters. May the Force be with each of you as well.
Anakin smiled and bowed to each of them. A sense of healing grew within his heart. For the first time since this whole ordeal, he felt like there was a light at the end of the tunnel. Even though he still couldn't see it, there was a hope that it would come. And thanks to the extra assurance from the Council, he believed he would find his closure. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, and maybe not in a week from today. But another day he would. That was more than enough reassurance to trust the healing process. Truthfully, the Council couldn't blame Anakin. He could feel the blame, he could harbor his own self-doubt if he wanted, but they themselves did not blame him. As a Jedi, it was their responsibility to own up for their failure, and for Anakin to own up to the mistakes of another showed the Council his true heart. The guilt he bore and the shame he felt for something so far out of his control established the first sense of true trust in Skywalker from the High Council. They saw the entire ordeal as a concentrated effort from Barriss and Ahsoka, so both Luminara and Anakin weren't the face to blame. What probably aided the Council's view of Anakin in this situation was the fact that Master Unduli's student also acted out. If it was just Ahsoka, that'd be a different story, but considering it was the most orthodox Jedi in the Order, and one of the most unorthodox, it made them feel like it wasn't Anakin's or Luminara's fault. The rest of the war would continue. Anakin obviously was a bit put off by everything regarding his former student, but with the Council, his master, and Padme by his side, he felt like he could fully recover from it. Though the most integral change for Skywalker was the fact that he began rescinding his usage of darker powers. Despite the Council's belief, he didn't want to feel the pain he felt before. He managed to convince himself that Ahsoka's turn was his fault, and while he wasn't currently drowning himself for it anymore, he had to make a choice in his present so that he could have a more fulfilling future. This was a coping mechanism for him. If he refused the darkness, then he'd be a better instructor when it came time for him to do it again. That was the thought he went with, and he stuck to it. Anakin and Obi-Wan would have a couple of really deep conversations throughout the rest of the war. They would truthfully be perfect for both of them, considering each of them lost someone of such importance in the same amount of time. Also, Ahsoka was held in high regard for Obi-Wan, just not as high as held as Satine was. Ahsoka and Barriss, on the other hand, would be pushed further and further into the darkness. It was consuming. Initially, especially Ahsoka, saw it as an opportunity to have a second chance at life, literally, to try something new. Then it took her over. To have power and control, it gave her life. She didn't get around to killing civilians, however, she did get to see what the Jedi did. Their neglect to starving people, their neglect to those in need. For both of them, it was horrendous, but it especially drove Ahsoka further into the darkness. Sidious promised them longevity in the coming Empire. His goals were still to pull Anakin to his side, and he just assumed that Ahsoka would aid him in those efforts. Sidious would also find out at the end of the war, which came incredibly quick. After the Battle of Coruscant and a duel in which Anakin killed Dooku without executing him, Sidious prepared for the plan to undo everything. He would flip the Republic into the Empire and wipe out the Jedi. It would take one simple move, and he was eager to do it. All he needed was the Council to fully disperse. Without knowing that Anakin and Obi-Wan were simply tied together because of the Council, despite how much they were around each other, he never expected Skywalker to go with Kenobi to Utapau. No matter, he'd have everything prepared for when he returned. Obviously, he needed Kenobi out of the way, but with his students hungry for action, he was ready to move forward with Order 66. It took a day or two. First, Yoda went to Kashyyyk, and then Obi-Wan and Anakin had to go out to Utapau and get themselves situated. What followed was a full-scale invasion and a duel between the droid general and the two Jedi. Skywalker and Kenobi worked off of each other extremely well. They went head-to-head against Grievous, but Anakin's offensive mode, even without the dark side, was weak against Grievous. His strategy worked to perfection against him. However, against Form 3, that was a different story. Obi-Wan and Anakin were able to eventually inform the High Council about their victory over Grievous. With most of the Jedi off-planet, it made the lead decision up to Mace Windu. He was under the impression that Palpatine was a Sith Lord, and so he brought his cohorts to confront the Chancellor. It ended up in a conversation. Mace wanted to know if Palpatine would give up his control of the Senate with the victory over Grievous. Obviously, everything was said in a much better sentiment, but Sidious could see the move the Jedi were trying to make, and he reacted. As he and the four Jedi walked across the room, he ignited a lightsaber into both Mace's and Fisto's backs before getting into a very quick engagement with Saesee Tiin and Agan Kolar, killing both of them in the span of a few moments. He was so pleased with himself, so he moved on to the next task, Order 66. He knew that Skywalker would likely survive the event, and if he did, then he would use Ahsoka to turn him. The march in the temple was accompanied by Ahsoka and Barriss, with Grand Inquisitor on the inside. Their greatest challenge was the unsuspecting Sin Dralik. The only reason the duo beat him was because he wasn't expecting it. However, for Jedi Master Shaak Ti, who was present, she was able to fend off both Ahsoka and Barriss. It wasn't the easiest thing, but the chaos around them helped her survive the encounter. Shaak Ti was able to disarm Barriss and throw Ahsoka into a pillar, before escaping and helping other Jedi make a run. Operation Nightfall was horrendous. On Utapau, Commander Cody and Captain Rex had a split-second disagreement over Order 66, which literally saved Anakin and Obi-Wan's lives. It wasn't technically a disagreement. More or less, Rex heard the command and grabbed Cody's wrist, reminding him of Fives. Cody heard the story before, but he didn't have as deep of a connection with Fives as Rex did. So when Rex brought it up and stopped them, they froze long enough for both Jedi generals to make an escape. The clone commander and captain were able to express to their troops that they were suffering from fatigue, which is why they were slow to respond. Once the Order took complete control, they went on the hunt for their Jedi. Thousands of Jedi were killed across the galaxy, but thanks to the efforts of Shaak Ti, she was able to scrounge up around 450 survivors from the temple, most of that because of her fending off Barriss and Ahsoka. They were both really talented, but they struggled once they were facing down a true Jedi Master. The following day, after Order 66, Kenobi, Skywalker, Yoda, and Shaak Ti would return to the temple. They'd come looking for survivors and find each other, which was the greatest relief among how many tragedies there really were. Though because Barriss and Ahsoka were still inside the temple, they informed the Master of who was here. Sidious brought with him Grand Inquisitor and a couple of his own royal guards. His shuttle transported him across the city to the steps of the temple, where he landed. The four Jedi were still on the inside, still assessing all the damage, Shaak Ti seeing everything for the first time during daylight hours. When they heard the shuttle, the four of them looked to each other with a sense of knowing of who it was. When they looked to the edge of the temple, they could see a number of figures walking towards them. They ignited their weapons, and from the sky dropped down Barriss and Ahsoka, igniting their crimson lightsabers. Sidious stopped with the Grand Inquisitor and four royal guards next to him. He spoke up, telling the Jedi that their time had come to an end. He extended his hand outwards towards Anakin, calling him his boy, and telling him that he could find his own peace in this new galaxy with him. Skywalker looked around, still trying to process why Barriss and Ahsoka weren't dead. He hadn't had nightmares of Padme dying simply because he was never around Palpatine after he learned out about the pregnancy. Skywalker wasn't even added to the High Council. His confusion was staggering. He expressed that he would never join the dark side. Sidious shrugged his shoulders, expressing that it was too bad. he would have made a fine Sith. Lightsabers ignited and a full-fledged battle began. The 4 royal guards were thrown into the sky, and lightsabers collided. Sidious fought against the Grand Master. Kenobi defended himself from the Grand Inquisitor. Skywalker lined up against Ahsoka, and Shakti had herself Barriss. It was a fight like one seen during the old days, a war between light and dark, and what held the fabric of the entire galaxy together. Skywalker and Ahsoka got into an extended match. He couldn't understand why she would choose this path, and she got furious, expressing that she told him time and time again about the war and how she hated it. So he called her out on her foolishness and her actions, and what she did only harmed the galaxy more. She didn't agree. Much like Dooku, she believed the Jedi and the Republic were the curse. She wasn't fully invested into the Sith, but she was willing to make the sacrifice for the greater good of the galaxy. Skywalker couldn't stand how pretentious it sounded, because it was just like Dooku. Their blades slammed together, while behind him, Shakti and Barriss continued their fight from the last night. Sidious and Yoda toiled back and forth. Their fight was remarkable, and their blades moved at incredible rates. At the same time, Kenobi moved his blade to defeat the Grand Inquisitor, who despite being very talented, wasn't ready for a competition with a Master on the High Council. Obi-Wan moved to aid Grandmaster Yoda as Shakti pressed Barriss back and defeated her as well. It was a single move, and it was effortless, after having understood her moveset from the previous night. With 2 of their opponents gone, Shakti prepared to help out against Sidious, but she saw Anakin fighting his apprentice. Their duel was flashy, but it stopped when Skywalker shoved Ahsoka back, saying,
I will not fight you anymore. Please, Ahsoka, come back. I know there is still good in you.
Poor choice, Anakin.
Ahsoka took advantage of this momentary lapse in Anakin's judgment, as she spun her lightsaber around and thrusted the blade through Anakin's lower chest, missing his heart, but shocking him. She smiled. Her pride would only last a few short seconds as Shakti wailed her lightsaber across the back of her head, killing her instantaneously. Kenobi, Yoda, and Sidious were all engaged, but the death could be felt, and when their eyes went back they could see it. Ahsoka was clearly dead, and Anakin was moments away from death, as Shakti ran down to his side. Her eyes pulled away from Anakin as she pressed her hand gently down onto his chest, while holding his head off the ground. She watched a distracted Obi-Wan slip up, and the strike would have been lethal, but Yoda moved in front of Kenobi, taking the entire blade of Sidious just in time for Obi-Wan to throw his blade into Sidious's chest. Obi-Wan caught Yoda before he dropped to the ground, his lightsaber falling out of his hand as he looked to Shakti, who waved him over. Yoda was fading in and out of life, and Obi-Wan brought him over to Shakti's side. Yoda put his hand up. He knew what would happen. Shakti may have been a powerful Jedi, but to save them both would kill her. He spoke up under his dying breath.
No, Master T. The future. You are. The future he is. Take your gifts and pass on what you have learned.
Before she could refute what he said, he died in Obi-Wan's arms. She would have sacrificed her life for the 2 of them, but she turned back to Anakin, whose left hand was gripping her forearm with all of his strength. His vision was blurry, and he was starting to fade out. But as he did, Shakti used some of her knowledge from the restricted section to save him. What used to be known by every Jedi in the old days, before the Old Republic, was now just knowledge only a few possessed. She learned it before she went to Kamino, because whenever a clone severely injured themselves doing the Citadel course, she used it. It was incredibly important for saving Anakin's life now. While the Jedi Order was gone, and the trauma of facing down his former student haunted Anakin, he would find resolve. Without Sidious crowning himself as Emperor or tearing the Republic down, the Republic could maintain its democratic process with Mas Amedda in control as Speaker of the Senate, if you will. The Separatists were surrendering, and the clones on Utapau captured the Separatist Council due to Anakin and Obi-Wan's strategy. Anakin's strategy more so, considering he went for a far more aggressive assault than Obi-Wan would have. The clones would have their chips removed, and the Jedi would look for a new home. With 450 survivors from the temple alone, and less than 100 from around the galaxy still alive, the Jedi needed a haven. Luckily, Shakti knew the perfect place. The Jedi would relocate to the dense jungles of Kashyyyk to rebuild their order and find their new home. It would take time and it would be arduous, but the end result would be worth all of it. Because of Anakin's little relationship, the Jedi had to change their views on attachments. Considering Shakti and Obi-Wan were 2 of the remaining council members, they had to make it up as they went along. Their loyalty to the code was important to them, but perhaps with all the trauma their students faced, it wouldn't be a terrible idea to allow some attachments so they could work on themselves. Padme, Luke, and Leia were brought to Kashyyyk with them to be a part of this rebuilding process. Luckily, the Wookiees had a couple places that they were willing to give up, so the Jedi really only needed to relocate their archives and a couple of other things to this new temple. It was a perfect setup. Padme embraced Anakin's adoration for the Order, as he embraced her adoration of helping the Republic repair itself. Because Luke and Leia were always being looked after on Kashyyyk, Padme felt comfortable enough to be on Coruscant for periods of time to help restructure the Republic. It was hard, and it tested her patience, but the Republic very quickly backpedaled to a system that functioned like the one Valorum left behind. The only thing now was forcing the corporations out of the Senate. For the years that followed, the Jedi would find their purpose once again. While the trauma of what happened to a student would never leave him, Anakin would eventually rise to become the fabled Grand Master for generations of Jedi. It did help that Luke and Leia would continue on the Skywalker name, both of them even having a kid or two to carry on said name. But with the Sith gone, the Jedi had nothing to worry about other than pirates, peace, and telling stories of the mythical Grand Master, Anakin Skywalker, and the legends of those who came before him, such as Grandmasters Shaak Ti, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Yoda. And that, my friends, is our story. Again, special thanks to Galvin Gaming, Tristan, Mandalore, Sir William, 1767, Darth Revan, Granddaddy Bane, The Last Jedi, Apollo, Weewoo 670, Anakin Stank Runner, CT7567, Oz of Oz, Darth Nux, The Eternal Padawan, Malik, Johnny Naguin, Sans the Skeleton, Jedi Sloth, Mr. Yeet Gamer, Lord Calig, Yelling Slayer 66, Madman Studios, Anakin 003, Lord Draken, Fortress Legacy Star Wars, Erebus, Rex the Wolf, Man of Three First Names, Dark Saint 46, Baron Joshua, and Lord Deadwing for supporting the channel. Smash that like button if you want to support me in other ways. Go check out the Patreon if you want to support the Sith Clone Wars or see early access to things like the Sith Clone Wars or the animations. Otherwise, let's talk about the story real quick. So I thought it'd be interesting to have Ahsoka join Palpatine, but it has to be like this situation where she has no other choice. Like the only choice she has is to join Palpatine. And she's doing it because she's willing to see the alternative. And I think that's like a very Dooku-like thing, and so she ends up becoming kind of like Dooku, and Barriss and Ahsoka essentially become Dooku in their own way. But for Anakin, the important thing is him seeing what happened to Ahsoka, and then fearing that he caused it. And that, I think, is a very integral piece to this, is that self-realization that he may have accidentally caused that to Ahsoka by having acted out in the ways that he did in front of her and having her feel as if she could do something like that and not, die for it. Obviously, the trauma of him seeing her alive afterwards would be, that'd be something. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed. I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.